Isack Hadjar's first career podium in Zandvoort came after an extraordinary performance from the rookie, as his quest of pursuing the Red Bull seat continues. With Tsunoda's fate still unsecure from 2026 onwards, will this infamous call finally arrive at Hajar's phone? And more importantly, will Red Bull make sure that this will be an actual promotion and not a demotion, as many believe the narrative would be if it happens right now? There is no other way around it. Hajar's performance in Zandvoort was absolutely dominating throughout the entire race. He kept his qualifying position at P4, and when the cards opened up for him with Lando's engine failure, he was there to utilize it and score his first career podium. During this race only, Hajar scored more points than the second Red Bull car has done throughout the entire year. And that speaks volumes as to where the Austrian team's priorities should be. But this good performance of Hajar, although putting him on the map now that he's entered the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship, might be a bit of a curse as well. The next step in his career is the Red Bull seat, which we know is considered a bit troublesome to be in right now. Perez, Lawson and Tsunoda would have a word or two to say on this matter. And although the priority for Red Bull is to give Tsunoda enough time to regain his form in 2025, the options for 2026 are open after Zandvoort. I do strongly believe that Hajar is the clear favourite to replace, because it makes the most sense at this point. Even if Yuki is not to be blamed for not scoring points with the car, he's ultimately failing to score points, and Red Bull needs a driver who can do the opposite of what Yuki is doing right now. I know the problem is probably the car and its technical characteristics, but then again, we have no idea whether Hajar could adapt to it. As a rookie, he's performing extraordinarily well in racing bulls, and maybe he could transfer that form to Red Bull as well. Even more importantly, Max's future is still hanging in the air. If the four-time world champion decides to call it quits on Red Bull beyond 2026, then Red Bull is going to enter into a rebuild mode with their strongest asset, which at this point seems to be Isack Hadjar. Be that as it may, Hajar made a promise. This podium finish won't be the last one, as his goal is loud and clear to receive the chance in Red Bull and show Helmut Marko that he is here to stay. Elaborating further on the amazing race in Zandvoort, Hajar said, "The podium feels a bit unreal. What was most surprising to me was keeping that fourth place for the whole race. Unfortunately for Lando, we took advantage, but yeah, we made no mistakes. The car was on rails the whole weekend. I'm really happy for myself because I maximized what I had, made no mistakes, and brought home the podium. And I am so happy for my guys. This is the first step, my first podium, and hopefully much more. The options are clear. In 2026, you'll be racing next to Max Verstappen, and the goal is to be as close to him as possible. The projected gap for Tsunoda was around 3:10, which he is having a hard time keeping up with. But even when he was just 1:10 behind Max on Saturday, he wasn't able to progress in Q3. So if Hajar was in that seat, he would have to be extremely competitive and aggressive every session, because the car itself is highly unlikely to be friendly oriented towards him. What doesn't bode well for him is that if Red Bull starts the season with problems, then it's highly unlikely they'll be able to solve them easily throughout the campaign. The reason for that is how 2025 turned out to be. When the car lacked performance, the upgrades did all but solve this issue, and Max was forced to adapt to the challenging nature of the car, while Yuki failed to do so. This is the biggest fear that Hajar should have if he is to be promoted to Red Bull from 2026 onward. Again, the fresh reset should make things a bit different, and the prospect of Arvid Lindblad is also putting pressure on the Austrian squad to make changes sooner rather than later. The bad news for Tsunoda is that his results are just not enough. Although he finished his drought and scored points in Zandvoort at P9, and the main protagonist to take his seat scored his first career podium with the team that Yuki hasn't been able to score a podium for in 5 years. Of course, the competitiveness of AlphaTauri and then Racing Bulls was nowhere near comparable to what it is today. But still, it's a fact that should stand as it is. What would happen to Yuki if Red Bull commits to this move and replaces him? While many have already written him off the grid because of Cadillac's announcement for their lineup, an interesting opportunity has arisen for the Japanese driver. Alpine is understood to have put a lot of thought into whether or not Colapinto is worth continuing with from 2026 onwards, and the Enstone-based team might have held talks with Tsunoda about potential collaboration. It would be a reunion of former Red Bull drivers Gasly and Tsunoda, and a fresh new opportunity for Yuki to prove that in a different environment he can be a different and much better driver. Apart from Hajar, there are some other options that Red Bull will likely consider for the seat next to Max. Of course, we cannot overlook Liam Lawson. Although repromotion is not the way Red Bull has operated in the past, we have a new leadership under Laurent Mekies, and certain things could change when it comes to situations like this. Lawson's goal is similar to the one of Hajar. Score as good of results as possible and prove to Red Bull that the demotion came way too fast and in an unnecessary fashion.